Last-minute Caribbean deals aren't random, but most travelers search the wrong way. In this video, I'll show you a real example where the price dropped by over $500 a night just by shifting the dates. This isn't about luck, it's about understanding how the resorts manage unsold rooms. I'll also show you where last-minute deals actually show up, the one filter I always use first, and the biggest mistake that almost guarantees you'll pay too much. I'm Roger from priceoftravel.com. Let's get started. Let's start with where last-minute Caribbean deals actually show up, because this part is very predictable once you know what to look for. Last-minute bargains are far more common in the big resort markets than on the smaller islands, and the reason is simple: deals follow inventory and competition. In places like Cancun and the Riviera Maya, or Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, there are dozens of large all-inclusive resorts all competing for the same travelers. That means for almost any set of dates, a few properties will be a bit underbooked, and they'll cut prices aggressively rather than leave rooms empty. The good news is these are all excellent beach destinations anyway, so you don't have to sacrifice quality to find a great deal. If you're focused on the Caribbean, your first searches should usually be the Cancun area and Punta Cana. Both markets are huge and both regularly produce standout last-minute bargains. And in the Dominican Republic, you'll often see nearby areas like La Romana mixed into the same search results, which can sometimes be even cheaper. Now, quick note for my Canadian viewers. If you're starting your search, it's definitely worth checking package deals to Varadero, Cuba through the airline vacation sites. Those flight and hotel bundles can sometimes be shockingly cheap. And if you're in the western half of North America, it's also smart to check Puerto Vallarta and even Mazatlan, because those Pacific resort markets can produce very strong last-minute deals as well. And as always, it's smart to check the latest news and advisories before booking any trip. The key idea to remember is simple: the biggest resort markets give you the best odds of finding real discounts. Once you've identified a few strong destination options, the next step is to check airfares, because flights often end up being the quiet deal breaker. If you're deciding between places like Cancun and Punta Cana, it's smart to price out flights to both before you go too deep into hotel research. Sometimes one destination will clearly stand out with cheaper fares or much better flight times, and that alone can make the decision easy. It also pays to stay a bit flexible with your travel days. For last-minute trips especially, something like a Monday to Monday flight can be noticeably cheaper than the more popular Saturday to Saturday pattern. Now, if flight prices to your top choices are fairly similar, then you can move on and let the resort pricing be the deciding factor. But if one destination is dramatically more expensive to reach, it's usually best to know that early and focus your search where the total trip cost makes the most sense. Next, I'll show you exactly how to surface the real resort bargains, because the default search settings are often hiding the best results in plain sight. For checking Caribbean resort prices, I usually start with Expedia, because it makes it very easy to compare total prices and filter the results quickly. When you first enter your dates though, the listings typically default to recommended. That ranking can include things like popularity, availability, and partner relationships, which is why the very first thing I always do is switch the sort order to price from lowest to highest. That one step alone often reveals deals that were buried much farther down the page. From there, if I'm looking at all-inclusive resorts, I'll apply that filter and then I add the other key filter. I only show properties with an 8.0 review score or higher. In big markets like Cancun and Punta Cana, there are usually dozens of resorts that meet that threshold, so this quickly narrows down the list to strong candidates without wasting time on places you probably wouldn't book anyway. But here's where last-minute pricing gets really interesting. When you compare several different date ranges that could work for your trip, you'll often notice that the cheapest qualifying resort changes completely from one week to the next. Resort prices jump around far more than most travelers realize, especially in the last few weeks before arrival. For example, I recently checked 3 different weeks in Punta Cana. In one of those weeks, the Barceló Bávaro Beach Adults Only Resort showed up as the best deal at around $361 per night with an 8.6 rating. But the week before, the same resort was about $967 per night, and the following week it was over $1,000. That usually means the resort is already close to full for those surrounding weeks, but still has rooms to fill in the middle week, so the price drops aggressively. I saw a similar pattern with the Occidental Punta Cana, which was about $257 per night for one set of dates, but several $100s more for the weeks around it. Most travelers check one set of dates, look at the top results, and assume those are the real prices, and that's exactly why the best last-minute deals get missed. Last-minute resort pricing can be a bit of the Wild West, but once you understand how it works, those price swings are exactly where the biggest bargains tend to appear. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Flexibility is usually the key to finding the very best last-minute deals. As we just saw, the standout bargains tend to pop up wherever a resort happens to have extra rooms to fill, and in these massive resort regions there are often several nearby areas included in the same search results. Take Cancun for example. Most people immediately think of the famous hotel zone, and there are definitely deals there, but you'll also see options in places like Playa del Carmen, Cozumel, or the broader Riviera Maya. Very often, the best last-minute price will show up in one of those nearby areas, and the reality is they're all excellent beach destinations, so by being open to a 60 to 90-minute shuttle ride, you might save $50 or sometimes much more per night and still end up in a great resort. You'll see a similar pattern in Punta Cana. Just a bit to the south and west is the La Romana area, where you'll often find smaller resorts, sometimes run by the same major hotel groups, showing noticeably better last-minute pricing. The key idea is simple. Small compromises often create big savings. Next, I'll show you how to quickly read hotel reviews the smart way, because not all 8.2 rated resorts are created equal. Now let's talk about reviews, because this is where a lot of travelers either overthink things or ignore important signals. Some people are understandably skeptical of online reviews, and if a hotel has a high score with only a few dozen reviews, I'm skeptical too. But in these large resort markets, many properties have thousands of verified reviews. In that case, it's very difficult to fake that kind of volume, and real patterns tend to emerge pretty quickly. So if a resort has an 8.0 or higher rating based on thousands of reviews, that's usually a strong starting point. But here's the important part, not all 8.2 rated resorts are created equal. Once you're narrowing in on a specific property, take a few minutes to read the 10 or 20 most recent reviews. You're not looking for perfection, you're looking for patterns. Expedia now even provides a summary of what guests mention most often, which can be very helpful. If hundreds of reviews mention a beautiful beach and a great pool area, that's a good sign that those strengths are consistent. On the other hand, if multiple recent reviews mention slow drink service, repetitive buffet food, unreliable Wi-Fi, or ongoing construction noise, that's valuable information too. Depending on what matters most to you, those issues might be minor or they might be deal breakers. The goal isn't to find a perfect resort, it's to make sure the things you care about most aren't the property's weaknesses. Now let's go over the common mistakes that quietly prevent people from finding the best last-minute deals in the first place. The first mistake is falling in love with one specific resort. This is very common. Someone has a great trip somewhere, and the next time they travel, they want to find a last-minute deal to that exact same property. Unfortunately, last-minute pricing doesn't really work that way. The best bargains show up wherever a resort happens to have extra rooms to fill. If you stay open to comparable resorts in the same area, your odds of finding a standout deal go way up. The second mistake is locking yourself into one specific beach or zone. For example, many travelers focus only on Cancun's hotel zone, and yes, there are sometimes deals there, but very often an even better value is available in nearby areas like Playa del Carmen, Cozumel, or elsewhere in the Riviera Maya. The third mistake is trusting the default search ranking. As we discussed earlier, results typically start sorted by recommended, which isn't designed to service the cheapest options first. Savvy travelers will always switch to sorting by price to quickly spot the standout bargains. And finally, the last mistake is waiting around for last-minute deals during the busiest travel weeks of the year. The 2 weeks around Christmas and New Year's are by far the most expensive time to visit the Caribbean. If that's when you plan to travel, it's usually best to book as early as possible because true last-minute bargains are pretty slim during that window. One quick reality check. If you're booking for the Christmas and New Year's window, last-minute deals are much harder to find. Late December is peak season across the Caribbean, and the best resorts usually fill up well in advance. So for those holiday weeks, book early. Don't wait for a price drop. Outside of that narrow window though, real last-minute deals do show up regularly, especially if you stay flexible. And if you want to see how Caribbean prices move throughout the year, I also did a full Caribbean price calendar video. I'll link to that below. So if you want to consistently find strong last-minute Caribbean deals, the game plan is actually pretty straightforward. Start by focusing on the biggest resort markets like Cancun, Punta Cana, and similar high-competition areas. Next, compare airfares early so you know which destinations make the most sense for your dates. When you search resorts, always sort by price first, then filter for properties with an 8.0 rating or higher to quickly narrow down the field to strong candidates. From there, take a few minutes to scan the most recent reviews so you can spot any potential red flags before you book. And most importantly, stay flexible. In the last-minute market especially, the best deals usually go to travelers who are willing to consider a few comparable options rather than locking in one specific resort. If you want more details, I've also put together an expanded version of these tips on priceoftravel.com, and I'll link that in the description below. And I've also included links to the example resorts I mentioned as well. You can use those to check current prices for your dates, and if you book through them, it also helps support the channel at no extra cost to you. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, I've got plenty more Caribbean strategy videos coming up. See you in the next one.